Hello and welcome back to my channel for my final NIFB video for the night. I have made 3 today, I think. Not including the why I go after the NIFB, so technically that's 4, but that was a 4-minute long video and that was nothing. So this one is Steve Anderson. We all know how I feel about Steve Anderson. He's gross. He's always gross. He hasn't changed, but this one is more dangerous than gross. This is why he doesn't use birth control and he doesn't believe in natural family planning, and that part's not the dangerous part. The part that he talks about how he quote-unquote has children spaced apart is dangerous, and that'll be the last clip, so we'll get into that in just a little bit. But Steve Anderson in this video does not take into account, he tries to twist science, he doesn't take into account certain things that we're going to go over. And he doesn't take into account with birth control that it is used for women with health issues, that it is used to help women with PCOS and endometriosis and any of that. He doesn't even consider that. And it's basically like having a sex ed mansplain to you. It's extremely frustrating. It's extremely annoying. And I honestly and genuinely think that a male pastor that knows nothing about female anatomy has any right to tell me what I should do with my female anatomy. So he can shove it where the sun don't shine as far as I'm concerned on that. But we're going to jump into the first clip and we'll discuss it and we'll go from there because I am a female. So let's have a female's perspective on what he has to say about birth control. Let's do this thing.
These are the basic classifications of birth control methods. First of all, you have hormonal birth control. And that's going to include your IUDs that release hormones, these Mirena ring thing, and the patch, and the shot, and the mini pill, and the combination pill. All hormonal birth control methods, we'll put those in the same category, and those should be immediately ruled out of being manslaughter. Or if you do it intentionally on purpose, it would be murder. If you do it by accident, it's manslaughter, okay? Those are ruled out. Well, then another method that people would use is the Onan method, we'll call it. You know, spilling it on the ground. You know, the Bible isn't really saying anything positive about that method. Then another method that people would use is a barrier method, is what they'll call it. And to me, a barrier method is pretty much the same thing as Onan's method. You know, I'll put it in the same category, personally, okay? And then another method that's pretty popular amongst Catholics, and this is what the Catholics teach that you should be doing, is called natural family planning, or NFP. Now, natural family planning, you know, you're not really using birth control per se, because you're not using barriers, you're not using the pills or anything like that. Oh, and I forgot another birth control method, what I call mutilation. Either the man or the woman mutilates themselves, or, you know, has a surgery that mutilates their body so that they become infertile. But, you know, natural family planning. Now, I'm just going to say it right now. I'm against natural family planning. I don't believe in it. I do not think that it is a good way well, I don't believe there's any way. And I'm going to get to how my children, because think about this. I have 8 children. Are my children all 9 months apart? My children are approximately 2 years apart. And we do not use any birth control.
Okay, so this first clip, I put it in. It's a little bit long. I think it's like a 2-minute clip, which was actually originally a 4-minute clip that I just sped up. He just goes through all the list of birth controls, and the reason I wanted to put that in is he is not technically wrong, except for the fact that it is called Mirena. If you're going to lecture me on what I put in my own body, then at least pronounce it correctly. Mirena. Okay? That's the first thing I want to talk about. Then he goes on to talk about the Onan method, or the pull-out method. I can vouch that that actually works pretty freaking well mixed with natural family planning. My husband and I did it for years and he says, I don't know if I saved this clip or not, but he says that natural family planning, you have to block out like a whole week, and then you have to block out a whole week for your period. Well, that's not counting a lot of things. Let's start with my husband and I, we did 2 days before ovulation, day of ovulation, and every time we did the pull-out method, but we abstained 2 days before ovulation, the day of ovulation, and then went back to our normal. So it was just like 3 days. That was it. Not a whole week. And then he talks about you're already blocking on another week for your period. Well, as a woman, I'd like to explain something to Steve Anderson. Not all women's periods are 7 days. Mine is not always 7 days. Sometimes mine can be 7 days if it's slow. But mine normally is about 4. 3 heavy days, 1 light day. And then there's kind of some stuff here and there, maybe. But 4 days. So that's a total of 7 days total out of my entire month that were blocked out. That's it. It's a whole week. So right there shows that you're trying to mansplain me on my own body when you don't even know what's going on with it. So you don't know what goes on. Every woman's period is different. Some women have it for 3 days. Some women have it for as long as 7. Women who have longer cycles, women who have different cycles have longer, it can be longer than 7 days. Some women Just like how ovulation works, sometimes it happens as early as 14 days and some days earlier. Sometimes for some women, it can happen all the way up to like day 20, where they have a 34-day cycle, where that is still considered normal. So unless you know that, unless you can tell me about that, don't tell me what birth control methods I should be using, because you don't even know how the wide range of how a female menstrual cycle works. So there's that. Then you talk about how that birth control should be considered manslaughter. It's not manslaughter, dude. It's not. Your whole thing that it keeps a fertilized egg from implanting into the wall, which we'll get into more detail later, is not actually a thing. I'll post a link down below where that is debunked. You know it's debunked. You had to do the same research I did, so it means you stuck to Christian blogs and anything that agrees with you. That's called confirmation bias. I actually went off of what scientists were saying. So there's the other thing. That's all I have to say on that. I know I just made you watch a pointless 2-minute video for no reason, but I wanted you to see, oh wait, mutilation. I forgot about that, where he talks about where if you get snipped or your husband gets snipped, that it's mutilation. Are you circumcised? Did you circumcise your child? Because that is technically genital mutilation. So if you're against that, are you against circumcision? Because both are technically what you would consider in the mutilation category. And before people come for me in the comments saying that I'm anti-circumcision, I'm actually not. And there's some scientific reasons as to why I am for circumcision and why I'm against circumcision. I'm on the fence about it. I'm actually leaving that decision, if we ever have a boy, up to my husband. But, because he has the junk, not me. But that is a conversation for a different day. Let's watch the next clip so we can discuss, and I'll see you in a minute.
Other than politicians who say it routinely because of the fact they want to be elected in liberal areas. So they lie and say, I believe that life begins at birth. I watched a debate one time between two politicians. One was a Republican and one was a Democrat. And they were running on the East Coast in a very liberal area. And the debate moderator asked them, when do you believe that life begins? One of them said, birth. And then they said to the other one, when do you believe life begins? Birth. Now that is so scientifically stupid. And it's amazing to me today how the atheists will claim to be so into science and we believe in the science. But it's funny when you confront them with science that flies in the face of their wicked ideology, then all of a sudden they don't believe in science anymore. Science will tell you it's alive. I mean, science will tell you that a tree is alive. Science will tell you that an earthworm is alive. But a human being living in its mother's womb, 9 months gestation, 1 day away from being born, they'll say it's not alive because they're liars and they worship Satan, that's why. And they love death. The Bible says all they that hate God love death. And that's what these people are. They love death. They're pro-death. It's not pro-choice, it's pro-death. Pro-life versus pro-death. The Bible says choose life in the book of Deuteronomy. But when we, excuse me, when we talk about life beginning at conception, the devil loves to change the meaning of words. Because if he can't get you to believe in the stupidity of some politician that tells you, oh, it's not alive until it's born. Well, what he'll do then is try to change the definition of words. And so he'll get Christians to agree, oh yeah, life begins at conception, so then he'll change the definition of conception. Now, conception has historically always meant fertilization. When the seed from the man and the egg from the woman come together and that egg is fertilized, that has been known as conception. But now they're starting to change the definition. And even in some dictionaries, they'll put a definition that says, well, it's fertilization or implantation. I've even heard a Baptist preacher buy into this and say, well, life doesn't begin until it's implanted. Let's see what...
Okay, so this clip, Steve Anderson is going into this lovely little rant about the boogeyman atheist. Hi there, I'm your boogeyman. Last time I checked, I'm not all that scary, and I'm not out trying to murder children, but what do I know? I'm the God-hating antichrist, trying to, lure your children into some weird life reprobate that I'm not, I promise. I genuinely stick to my own corner of YouTube, and I'm not even the most social creature. I don't go out and talk to people that much, because it's not my thing. But, I should stop joking, and I should get to the point. Let's start with, we do not deny that a fertilized egg has the potential to become a baby, and that it is not a life within itself. That is not at all what most atheists and most scientists say. What we do say is that it takes an awful lot for it to go from this point A, fertilization, to this point over here, point B, a live birth. Let's start with the fact that 80%, it's like 60 to 80% of fertilized eggs don't implant in the uterus. This has nothing to do with birth control. This has nothing to do with anything the woman does. It has to do with chromosomal defects. It has to do with just kind of the luck of the draw. And then even in the fertilized eggs that do make it to the uterus and do implant, they say could be as high as 25% of that ends in miscarriage. So, and a lot of that happens before a woman even realizes that she's pregnant. So when you go on this rant about silent abortion, there's a lot more silent miscarriages than there are silent abortions. And I'll debunk your silent abortion thing in that next clip. But those all classify as an important thing that you have to think about, that not all fertilized eggs are going to make it that far. Most of them don't. It's just not a thing. And it can take an average couple of up to a year to actually, from trying to conceive to actually conceiving a child. So keep that in mind when you're coming up with your next statistics as well, please, because you seem to want to gloss over that and act like it's not a thing, that like every time a woman has sex and she's fertile, she up and has a baby. That's not how this works. We all know that, so don't try and play me for a fool, because I'm not one. My links are always down below. It's just not how it works. So that debunks your whole, we don't think that a fertilized egg can and does lead to life. I also want to debunk that we are cool with having a child aborted up into moments before birth. You have 8 kids, correct? Which means that I think that you have to willfully be trying to deceive or strawman this argument, because you know, for starters, that a doctor cannot abort a child moments before birth, that while the woman is in active labor, which can be up to a couple of hours, up to 12 hours, up to 24 hours, from what I understand, on a woman who's been in labor for quite some time. They do try to progress that, and you'll probably end up a C-section if you hit that far, but they're going to do everything they can to save the life of that child and the life of that mother. So minutes or moments before death is not a valid argument. Days before, they're not going to do that. They're not going to, in this country, it's not even legal to kill a baby weeks or moments before. Doctors have a Hippocratic oath. The law states that they can't do that. So don't try to strawman argue that, because it doesn't work. You have 8 kids. You know this. Stop trying to play people for fools. We know better. We're not stupid. Don't be condescending, because it just doesn't work on a person like me. So, and I guess you're not really talking to someone like me, because I'm not your target audience, just like your NIFB people are not my target audience, and my target audience is people on the fence, just like I'm sure your target audience is people on the fence. But my point is, don't try to treat people like they're stupid. That's not how this works. Stop lying to your congregation, and stop trying to twist the science to whatever you're trying to make it into. It doesn't work that way. Okay, let's jump on to the next clip.
As it's called. These type of pills are hardly suppressing ovulation at all, and they're mainly relying on the backup mechanism, and they're mainly just destroying the environment, creating a hostile. If you actually look at the package insert, as I've taken the birth control pills and literally read the package insert, all that fine print says it creates a hostile environment in the uterus for the developing blastocyst, as they would call it. So these mini pills, or progestin-only pills, are actually doing this even more often. Constantly. It could be every other month that this is happening when you're on these type of pills. Same thing with the Depo-Provera patch, the Depo-Provera shots. Any hormonal birth control method is an abortifacient that is causing you to have a silent abortion some percentage of the time. And we as Christians should just reject it outright as being manslaughter or murder to take these type of pills, knowing what they're doing to your body and knowing what they're doing to your children. We need to just reject it outright and say it's immoral, it's sin, it's wrong, we shouldn't do it. I mean, that should be case closed for the most popular birth control method in America today. Not only that, but a lot of women will use what's called an IUD, an intrauterine device. This is where they put an actual object up into their bodies and in order to, again, stop the child from being able to implant. It's not going to stop you from ovulating necessarily, but it'll stop the child from implanting. Now we're starting to understand why it's called birth control, not conception control. It's not necessarily stopping you from conceiving, it's stopping you from giving birth. Doesn't mean the life's not going to be created, it's just going to die. It's not going to be born. We as Christians need to wake up and realize that everything that the devil and the world dishes out down at Walgreens is not something that we need to be purchasing and participating in, and we need to prove all things, and we need to figure out what we're putting into our body before we just put it into our bodies. And we need to be careful with this stuff. You say, well, you're condemning me because I use it. Look, 99% of women use it. And if you didn't know any better, well, you can't change the past. You know, shame on you for not knowing, but hey, everybody makes mistakes. We've all made mistakes. But you need to, now that you know the truth, repent. You know, now that you know that it's wrong, you need to decide, well, I'm never going to use those. I'm never taking birth control pills now that I know what they're doing. And not only that, I'm doing you a great favor by warning you about these things, because honestly, birth control pills are very harmful to your health in the first place because of the fact that they also increase your chances of getting blood clots and having a stroke and having a heart attack. You go to cancer.gov or whatever, even their main website, and they'll talk about the fact that estrogen that's in these birth control pills is a known carcinogen, or something that causes cancer. And I mean, who has heard research and things about estrogen being related with cancer? You know, estrogen, it's pretty common. And so taking this synthetic estrogen in these birth control pills is increasing your cancer risk, risk of blood clots, and a lot of other bad things. It's bad for your health. And it increases your risk for breast cancer. It increases your risk for a lot of other illnesses. And so these things are bad for your body. You say, why are they so popular? Why are so many women taking them? Well, obviously somebody's making money selling them, number one, and advertising them and telling you how great they are. And number two, because women are just hell-bent on not having children, apparently. They just want it. And a lot of people, when you start criticizing the birth control pills, well, what are we going to use? I mean, provide you with an alternative. And I'll get to that in a little bit, but because you say, which method of birth control is acceptable? What should we be using? Well, the short answer is nothing. Okay, but I'll explain that more as we go through.
Here you are again trying to misrepresent the science when you talk about hormonal birth control. You say that there's a primary mechanism and a backup mechanism. You're technically correct, but how you represent it is incorrect. I will post a link down below where it says, and it debunks, I'll post a couple actually, because there are a couple different sites that are going to back me up on this. But, and these are scientific sources, these are not Christian biblical sources, because those do not work. You cannot use the Bible to try and back up something. You need science. You need the scientific method to back something up. It says that it does not cause abortions, it does not stop a fertilized egg from implanting, it doesn't harden your uterus. I mean, when I typed in hardened uterus to do research for this, all I kept getting with birth control and hardening it was endometriosis. which is not something caused by birth control. It's actually something birth control helps. So that should give you an indication of how off the rails we are in the science department here. But I'm digressing into a totally different conversation. But we have to actually talk about numbers here. Okay, I alluded to some of the numbers before, but you talk about breakthrough ovulation and how that leads to having like every other month or whatever, 60%. So you're basically every other month you're having breakout ovulation, which means you're having a silent abortion. No. Okay, let's say that every other month you are having a breakthrough ovulation. You have to have the peak conditions to get pregnant. Now, am I saying that you're never going to get pregnant on birth control? There are some people that do. They are using it incorrectly and they do end up with those peak conditions. It's not impossible, but it's not as likely if you are taking it correctly and if you have breakthrough ovulation, because it thickens. It doesn't thicken the uterine wall. It thickens, this is going to be a weird conversation to have, it thickens your cervical mucus. And there has to, and when a woman is, when she's ovulating, her cervical mucus thins so that sperm can go up and they have a more hospitable environment. When she's not ovulating, it's thicker and the sperm die off quicker. Sperm can live in the vagina and up in there for about 7 days if conditions are correct. If they're not correct and a woman is having thicker cervical mucus and things like that, and it's harder for them to get up there, and even lube has an effect on this. Lube can slow down the sperm and keep it from going up there, then it's harder to get pregnant. And you have to think that, and we only take one sperm, but they have to go up to the right tube, and it has to be at the right time. And the egg, there's only like a 12 to 24 hour window where a woman can get pregnant from that. So there can be sperm that are already sitting there, and then there can be sperm you have on the day of ovulation, but that egg dies off pretty quickly. So if you have breakthrough ovulation, the sperm is slowed down. You only still have, with peak optimal conditions, you only have like a 30% chance of getting pregnant if you are trying and not using protection. So imagine if you're using lube and you have thicker cervical mucus and you don't know when you're ovulating and all these other things, then the chances are knocked down considerably on actually getting pregnant. And I feel so weird talking about this on a YouTube video, but it's knocked down considerably. So you're not getting pregnant and having a silent abortion every other month, like he's trying to make it out to be. He's trying to scare you. That's not how this works. Once again, it can take anywhere from, some people do get pregnant in the first month, but average couples, it can take anywhere from 3 months. That means you have a 1 in 3 chance to a year for normal fertile couples to have a child. They won't even look at you at a fertility clinic if you are under the age of 34 and you have not been actively trying for a year. I want you to let that sink in when he talks about how birth control is you're having a silent abortion every other month. You're most likely not having any sort of silent abortion. They have talked about how birth control does not cause you to lose pregnancy. It doesn't cause you to lose your child. It doesn't do any of that stuff. That is a myth. He is spouting pseudoscience at you, and it is extremely frustrating to have a man try to tell me how my birth control and my uterus works. It's offensive. I'm just saying. But let's jump on to the next clip because,
But look what it says in verse number 1. It says, "Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Defraud ye not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may use natural family planning." Is that what it says? It says, "Except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer. And come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency." What is the purpose of God saying, hey, do not abstain from a physical relationship with your spouse. Do not defraud one the other. He said, because you don't want Satan to tempt you for your incontinency. And the blackout period of natural family planning is the time when the husband and wife would be the most open to temptation. So, God's not even making any allowance for it here. He's not teaching us that, hey, abstain every month in order not to have children. No, children are a blessing. They're supposed to be fruitful and multiply.
Okay, so I put this clip in specifically for a reason. It's for the natural family planning thing where he talks about how if you deny your husband or you deny your wife, at least he's being an equal opportunist here. It allows Satan to come in, and where you shouldn't deny him in your peak fertilization or whatever you want to call it. Because then, you have that week of blackout and then that week of period. Once again, this explains that he has no idea that women's cycles vary, for starters, and how natural family planning works separately. Like I said, I combined the pull-out method, or the Onan method as he wants to call it, with the natural family planning. 3 days, 4 days. 3 days, the day before my ovulate, or the day before I ovulate, or 2 days before I ovulated. The day I ovulated, that was it. Then, and we combine the pull-out method with this, because I don't think either would be as effective without it. And then 4 days. That's how long my period on average is. 4 days. 3 days of heavy, 1 day of light, and then maybe every once in a while something, if he comes out, maybe, not necessarily, but 4 days. 7 days out of the month total. If your husband can't keep his meat in his pants for 7 days, there's more wrong with your marriage than natural family planning. Because I can tell you right now, my husband has not cheated on me. We've been together for 6, almost 7 years, and we used that all the way up until we started trying to get pregnant. So I want you to think about that. That was a method we used. He did not cheat. He did not sit there, and I mean, sometimes he would moan and groan in those 4 days because 3 days was about his limit, but he got over it real fast when I was like, don't touch me, you suck. But there was some moaning and groaning, but there was no like, oh, I'm so horny, I can't control myself, I gotta go fall into the nearest vagina. That's not how that works. And once again, if he can't control himself for even if you do the 7 blackout day and you have a 7-day period, realistically, you can still have sex on your period if you want. There are late days, I promise. It's not everything this guy is making it out to be. So it's a straw man argument, it's a pathetic argument, and it just doesn't work.
Hey, Pastor Anderson, how you doing? How are you not having children every 11, 12 months, Pastor Anderson? What's the deal? What's your secret? Well, here's the thing. This used to be information that was passed down from mothers to their daughters. But this information has fallen off the face of the earth, unfortunately, so now your pastor has to teach you in church, of all places. But actually, the answer is in the Bible. Because look down at your Bible there at Hosea chapter 1, verse 8. By the way, the answer is always in the Bible. Sometimes it's hard to find. Sometimes it's not obvious, but the answer is always in the Bible. Hosea chapter 1, verse 8 says this. Now, when she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. When did this woman conceive? When she weaned. Why? Because breastfeeding will stop you from getting pregnant. Period. Now you say, oh, I don't believe that. That's a hoax, old wives' fable. Okay, look at my family back there and tell me it's an old wives' fable. If it's an old wives' fable, then why is it that my wife and I have been having a physical relationship for all these many months since Boaz has been born, and yet she's not pregnant? How are we doing it? What's the secret? Are we using natural family planning? No. Onan style? No. Walgreens? No. CVS? No. How are we doing it? Because she's breastfeeding the baby. You say, well, that doesn't work for everybody. But here's the thing. It doesn't work for everybody because of the fact that people don't do it right. Now, again, I'm not saying that there's never going to be an exception to this where a fluke could happen and a woman could get pregnant. Whatever. Look, there's always a chance for a fluke to happen, and the exception proves the rule, but it is 99% effective if you do it properly. If you breastfeed on demand your child, that will prevent you from getting pregnant again until it is naturally safe to do so. Look, God designed it in his wisdom. Think about how smart God is. God designs it where a woman gives birth to a child, and then breastfeeding that child keeps her from getting pregnant again until her body has a chance to recover. And then by the time the child is older and grown and able to eat a lot of solids and breastfeeding less and less, then the woman's fertility will come back, and then she'll be able to have the next child. I mean, if you look at how children are spaced in the Bible, they're not just back to back. You look at a lot of children where it actually gives us the spacing, because the Bible doesn't usually give us the spacing, but some examples where we get the spacing is like with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We can calculate the spacing. We can also calculate the spacing with Miriam, Aaron, and Moses, and they were like 2 or 3 years apart when we look at the spacing in those situations. How do they do it? Through breastfeeding. Now, these are the rules, though, in order for this to be effective, and the fancy name for this is lactation amenorrhea, all right? And this is not a birth control method because we were going to breastfeed the kid anyway. It's just called doing it normal. It's called just having your kid and feeding it the way God planned. So this isn't natural family planning. That's why I want to make sure there's no confusion here. This is not a birth control method. This is not using birth control and yet having children that are spaced normally and naturally and healthy. But this is why it doesn't work for most people, because if you put your kid on a 4-hour feeding schedule, not going to work. It's popular to say, oh, feed your kid every 4 hours on the nose, 4-hour feeding schedule, not going to work. You must feed the child on demand, meaning when it's hungry, feed it. And with a newborn, that's pretty much every hour. So when my wife has a little baby, she's feeding the baby constantly. She's nursing it constantly, okay? That's one of the rules, okay? Number 2, the baby has to sleep in bed with you. Because if you don't have the baby in bed with you, then you can't feed it on demand throughout the night every hour. I mean, you're not going to get up every hour and sit there. And people make it so much harder than they have to. They get up, they feed the baby, or especially if they're doing formula feeding. They get up, they heat it up, they get it going. And people always ask my wife and I, they'll ask us, hey, are you guys getting any sleep? And honestly, we usually sleep pretty well after a baby's born. We're like, yeah, we slept all night, just fine. Now, we've had some sleepless nights, usually when they get older and they fuss and they have issues. But honestly, when my wife just had a baby, often we will sleep like babies. We'll sleep perfectly. Why? Because this is how my wife feeds the baby in the middle of the night. She rolls over, sticks the breast in its mouth, and falls back to sleep without even getting up, without doing anything. She's just laying there sleeping, the baby starts squirming, and she grabs it, puts it on there, and done. Feed in your sleep. What's the point of staying up and torturing yourself? Okay, that's how she does. Now, a lot of people say, oh, baby in bed with you. That's a bassinet next to the bed. No. See, and this is why it doesn't always work for people, because they don't follow the protocol that's going to work. They try to do a 4-hour feeding schedule. They're supplementing with bottles. They're having the baby in a bassinet or a crib or something like that. No, the baby has to be in bed with you. Okay, you say, well, no, you're going to roll over and it's going to die. Well, that's a myth. The woman who overlaid it in the Bible was probably drunk or on drugs. She was a prostitute, for crying out loud. Okay? And, to show Bible on this, in Luke chapter 11, in the parable where the Father is giving the Holy Spirit, he said, my children are now in bed with me. So throughout history, a lot of times people have had the baby in bed with them. We've always had the baby in bed with us. And, we say, well, how can you have a relationship with your wife? Well, you know what? My wife and I seem to be having a physical relationship. If you look at the children we're producing, I don't think we have a problem in that area. But there are other places in the house, okay? But the bottom line is, and there are other times, but the bottom line is that at night, during sleep time, the baby should be fed throughout the night, and that will prevent you from becoming pregnant too soon in an unhealthy way. And like I said, we've got the proof right there. Seven spaces there that are naturally spaced. And if you tell that to a doctor, they'll laugh in your face. But you know what? Doctors believe a lot of foolish things. And it is a fact. It is true. There are all kinds of scientific reasons why it works. And it's what we do. It's what we see in the Bible. And unfortunately, most women have never even heard of this. Never even been taught these things. But in reality, it's the way to go.
Okay, I'm going to apologize in advance about the length of the clip that I just made you watch. I think it's, before I slow it down, I think it's 7 minutes total. So I'm trying to get it to like 3 minutes and 50 when I speed through it. But the reason that I had you watch this entire clip, the reason I did not cut it down, the reason I did not edit it, is the importance of it. There's a lot to debunk here. There's a lot to go through here. So bear with me. I apologize, but this is where I was telling you he gets dangerous and where he's putting children's lives at risk. He talks about how him and his wife have had 8 children and they're evenly spaced apart. They're about 2 years apart, which means that it's taking about a year between each child before she gets pregnant with the next, year and a couple months. For the most part, I'm guessing there's either a year and a half or a year or 2 years between each child. I don't know all the ages of his children. I will say that I will give him credit. I've seen pictures of his children, and you have a beautiful family, Steve. You have a beautiful family. I will tell you that. And you are fracking lucky that you didn't smother one of them in your sleep. And the fact that you are encouraging and saying that it is a myth that you can roll over and smother your baby. SIDS is a thing. People smothering their babies, sudden infant death is an actual thing. And it's not just rolling over on your baby. The baby can kind of move and get a pillow over its face. A baby can end up with a blanket over its face. It can roll and not be able to get back over. They don't even want you putting a blanket in your crib with your baby for the first couple of months because your baby has a severe pillow. It's not even just a blanket. It's a pillow, stuffed animals. There's crib bumpers, nothing, because your baby has a chance of rolling over and smothering themselves. Because your baby can't roll back over. If it rolls this way, it could roll into the crib bumper. If the pillow moves, if the blanket moves, it gets over your baby's face and your baby can't breathe. And you add significantly to the risk of smothering your child if you stick that child in bed with you. I am cool with those co-sleepers that I actually bought one. I like to call it kind of like a mimosas basket that you put your baby in, but you still have to be careful. I have waiting for my child. I have a bassinet that will go next to my bed. He talks about the 1 hour feeding thing. On average, I think when my roommate had her baby and when my friend had her baby, and these were 2 totally different situations that we're going to talk about with formula feeding here in a minute, and plus my mom's experience with formula feeding, but she did feed about 1 to 2 hours when the baby was first born. She got up, and before they were formula feeding, she got up, she pumped, she did that. So yes, but it's not, most people don't do the 4 hours. They do it when they do feeding on demand when their baby cries. I don't know anyone actually that doesn't do feeding on demand. I don't know where you get this idea that people are like, only feed your baby. Like if your baby's crying and wants food, I don't know where this 4 hour thing came from. I don't know. But I do know that sticking a baby in bed with you is super dangerous. To preach to a bunch of gullible, basically cult following to sleep with their babies in bed with them is extremely dangerous. And that is dangerous within itself. But then we get into the having babies on top of babies, on top of babies, on top of babies. It's not healthy for a woman to have a ton of babies. People will say that it is, but it's not. And even Michelle Duggar from, what is it now, like 20 Kids and Counting? Because I think they adopted one. I haven't kept up with them in a while. But she's where I actually first learned about this, because once again, was raised in the IFB. And they were huge on the Duggars. But where your kid, okay, so when a woman has a baby, we all know how it attaches to the lining of the uterus. What we don't know is that every time she has a kid, it thins a little bit, and it thins a little bit, and your uterus becomes more compromised with every kid that you have. So even your wife going on 8 kids, her uterus, her 8th, 9th, 10th, and whatever kid, each pregnancy on, she risks uterine prolapse. She risks tearing her uterus. she risks having babies that are underweight and premature. We saw that with the Duggars. These are scientific facts, which once again, I will link down below with people that understand it better than I do. I just know that having baby after baby after baby is not healthy for your body in many ways, but that is the one that concerns me the most. I would not want my uterus to prolapse. For those of you who don't know what a uterine prolapse is, I'm sorry, but it's where your vagina, it's where your uterus falls out your vagina. Yeah, that's actually a thing, and that happens to women even with just a couple of children, and your chances of it get significantly worse with each child. Now, let's jump on to the whole, there are women who are just not, outside of that, are not physically capable of carrying children. My mother is a prime example. My sister and I both nearly killed her. My sister had preeclampsia. I was just a problem child from the moment I was conceived. I gave her all sorts of issues. I'm not sure if I gave her preeclampsia, but I know that she had a difficult pregnancy with me as well. And I know she had preeclampsia with my sister, and I know that they told her if she were to have another child, she could and probably would die, and that would not have been fair to us. I would have been very mad at my mother had she had a third child and then she had died and I had grown up without my mother. My mother was a stabilizing influence when it came to the insanity that was my two parents. My dad is a whole different story. For another day, I have alluded to the fact that he was a drunk and not the best influence, and I have a great stepmother. I want to be very clear that I'm not counting my stepmother in this because I'm not sure when he would have met her or if he would have met her. Sorry, Susan, I love you, and that has nothing to do with you. I'm just saying that being raised by my dad would not have been an option for me. I'm sorry. And I love you, and you were a great stabilizing influence, and I feel bad excluding you from this conversation. It doesn't mean that I don't love you. I'm sorry. Without getting too much into our history, it would have been at least 2 years before you would have come along, and I'm not sure if my dad had not been married at the time. And sorry, Susan, sorry, I feel bad. I love you. I love you to death. You are my second mother. No one can ever tell me anything differently. Hurts. But, yeah, my mother could have died, and he doesn't take that into account, and I don't think he cares very much at all about what would have happened to my mother. The same thing happened to my mother's mother. She had 3 children, and my aunt was born premature, and she nearly killed her mother. And complications that came from everything, from childbirth from her, even years later, are actually contributed to her death. And my mom was a child. My mother lost her mother when she was a child due to, I'm pretty sure, the 3 births that she had. And you need to take that into consideration, and you don't. You don't take medical science into consideration. You don't treat women as if they're anything more than cattle. We are more than cattle. We have rights. Okay. Seems how this is getting extremely long, let's jump on to how birth control helps women with endometriosis and PCOS. Those are things that can require birth control just for stabilization and pain relief. For those of you who don't know what endometriosis is, a basic description of it is where the uterine lining grows outside of the uterus. It can be extremely painful and extremely bad for some women, and they end up having to have hysterectomies and things like that, which I'm pretty sure Steve Anderson wouldn't even approve of anyway, even though it's causing women massive issues. PCOS is polycystic ovary syndrome. Birth control can help ease that as well. From what I understand, it can help with the hormonal imbalance and keep you from being an insane person. It can help you regulate your period. It can help in so many ways. So while you're sitting there trashing birth control and calling it murder, it is a medical necessity for millions of women in this country. And for you to sit there and mansplain to me and tell me that it's murder is downright irritating at best, condescending at worst. So go back to your corner and don't tell me how to run my body. Thank you. Now, the last part of the argument is, hi, so I'm adding this in because I realized, like I said, it's really late at night, and I realized that I forgot to talk about formula feeding. And I don't know where I'm going to add this in. I'll find a place to cut and add this in at. But Steve Anderson acts like formula feeding is a bad thing, and he kind of tries to nonchalantly shame women who formula feed. I'm going to give you 3 examples of where formula feeding was necessary, and we're going to start with my mom. I am the second child. I'm the baby. Hi, baby. Woohoo! But my older sister, my mom was trying to breastfeed her, and she wasn't producing enough milk, and my sister was losing weight, and she was getting sick, and there was something about her milk that wasn't working. So she ended up having to formula feed, and it happens. It happens. So to shame a woman, not every woman can feed not every woman can formula feed. Once again, he's not taking everything into account and mansplaining shit. So yeah. Then there is my friend who, my roommate, who she was not producing a lot of milk, so she was supplementing with formula feeding, and then she had an allergic reaction to something and just stopped producing milk. So she was feeding her baby completely with formula. Her baby is a very happy, healthy baby boy, and she did absolutely nothing wrong. She made sure that her child is fed. Then there is my friend who just from the get-go was not producing milk. She tried. With each child, she had 3, she tried everything. She had help. She had lactation consultants. Nothing was working. She didn't produce milk, so she bottle fed her baby, and that is her decision, and it's perfectly fine, and someone should not shame a woman for that. And yeah, so that's the reasons why women don't always breastfeed, you big old fat jerk. All right, well, that was my little cut in. We'll figure out where to put it in a minute, and I'll see you later.